My interest in football probably started about 7 or 8, just through watching football on the television, playing it in the playground. Just got interested in football, same way as lots of kids do.
Mm. Do you remember the first time you went to see a football match?
My first ever football match was when I was 6, and I went with my family to Wembley Stadium when Enfield played in the Amateur Cup final in 1970. They beat Dagenham 5-1. I can't say I remember much about the day, but I know that was the first game I ever went to.
Would you describe yourself as an Enfield superfan?
No, I was an Enfield fan. I just have more of an interest in the history of the club and an interest in the history of football, probably than most fans do. But I'm not a super fan from the point of view I went to every single game or anything like that. It's just my interest relates to the history of the club more.
Do you think it's significant that your first game was an Enfield game? Or was football just different then, so everyone supported their local team?
I don't think I think the interest in football history probably came first. I mean, I didn't start coming regularly to Enfield till I was 16. And those first few games, if you'd have said to me then, you're going to be watching the club for the next 20 years or so, you're going to end up studying the results and things like that, that was never in my mind. It was just one of those things, it was a love of the club that developed over time. I supported the club right up to the time they left Southbury Road, and I suppose there was a void to fill then, and having the interest in football history, I decided to look into the history of the club that I supported.
So you became like quite a dedicated fan?
Yeah, I was never a fan. I had season tickets for the home matches, so for the first 10 years or so I probably never missed a home game, and I went to quite a few of the away matches, but I was never somebody who went home and away every game of the season. I would go and watch matches at Barnet, at other local grounds. I then developed an interest in going watching different clubs all over the country. If Enfield were away, I wouldn't necessarily go and watch them, I'd go and watch somebody else play. So the interest in football was there, but I was never that fanatical about following Enfield to any and every match.
So football almost sounds like it became a bit of a lifestyle.
Life was dictated by the football fixtures, I suppose. It was the relief from the mundane work routine. It gave you something to look forward to at the weekend, and you tended to find that if you had a bad week at work and then you had a really bad Saturday when Enfield played really badly, it didn't help. In the early 90s they had a couple of Saturday games at Enfield where they had goalless draws, and they were very, very boring matches to watch. And I realised that I actually came to, as much as I would love supporting the club, I came to be entertained by the club. And that was my escapism, and I wasn't being released from my boredom in those particular weeks.
Would you say that your social life and your life...
I mean, when I first came to, the first time I came down to Enfield as a 16-year-old, I came down with a schoolmate. I was a Manchester United fan, he was a Liverpool fan. We lived in Enfield, but we'd never expressed an interest in Enfield football, and I don't honestly know why we said, oh, let's go to Enfield on Saturday. But it happened to coincide with the FA Cup run in 1981 when they got to the 4th round. So Enfield were in the national headlines. It was, the press and media were all over the club at that particular time. So from that point of view, you were part and parcel of this media circus. Obviously, once they got knocked out of the competition, the media left, and you were still there. So from that point of view, I got into it through a friend as much as anything, and I've got friends who I've met through football, but I've also got friends who are not Enfield supporters outside of the football. So it's the football doesn't completely dominate.
You always followed it a bits and pieces, but 16 was when you really, really got the bug, and that was when it was all in the media and the press.
Yeah, when I was, I came to my first game when I was 6, and I'm sure I would have started coming to Enfield a lot earlier. My dad was a fan back in the 1960s, but unfortunately my dad died soon after the first game that I came to. I'm sure if he had lived, he'd have been bringing me down here as a kid and introducing me to the club a lot earlier. I was aware of Enfield results through the local newspaper, but I'd never had any inclination to come down there until I came down at 16. And I say, it just coincided. I wasn't drawn down here by the publicity or anything like that, because the game I came to was before they started getting the big important games, before they started playing at White Hart Lane. and getting on national television. So that didn't draw me down here, but it just happened to coincide with my early days.
But as a fan, that's quite fortunate though, isn't it? Because that must have really added to like kind of like the whole passion and love and excitement around it all.
Yeah, it was nice. And what I think was nice in a way that, because you came and saw the games where the television cameras weren't down here, and then you saw the people on the television in the match, you thought, yeah, I see him on Saturday, I know him, I know how he plays. And in some ways it was like a private little world that you were privileged to. The outside world saw it briefly and then went away and ignored it, but you stayed with it, and it was like your own private little world, your little club, and it was precious to you. I mean, if you're a fan of Liverpool, Manchester United, you share that feeling with millions of people, but you're not close to it. You might be the other side of the world, and it's still your club, and you'll watch for their results, but you're not. There's no real sense of belonging as such. Whereas for a small club like Enfield, you'll be on the terraces with 800,000 people like that. You'll watch the game. You might then go into the bar afterwards, and the players, once they've had washed and showered, they'll come into the bar with you. You'll say, "You didn't play very well today." You can have a relationship. You can converse with them. You can't do that with players at Spurs, Arsenal, Manchester United. It's much more sense of belonging to the club.
Yeah, like local clubs must be like mini communities to a certain degree.
Yeah, and friendships and relationships, whatever, will get born out of that, and they will last a lifetime. And it's the football that's drawn them together.
So I know that you've done loads of work on the history of Enfield, and then this project came up.
Yeah.
Tell me about what it's been like being involved in this project.
Yeah. Well, when you're researching the history of the club for the book, you're going through local newspapers, you're going through things on the computer, you're going through your own records of the matches you went to. So it's very much a case of a factual thing, but obviously you're not aware of what happened behind the scenes. The nice thing with this project is being able to interview people. You get their viewpoints of it. You learn a little bit more the story behind the stories. And it's just I can sit and talk about football with the best of them. So being able to sit and talk with former players, people I used to watch, people who I know my dad used to watch and would have enjoyed watching. It's very rewarding, very interesting.
In terms of being involved in the project and having gotten to meet and interview the people and get the background as opposed to the facts, what's that been like? Tell me about that.
Actually meeting the people, it's nice to most of the people you've met through this are just ordinary, everyday run-of-the-mill people. They have 9 to 5 jobs. They don't have superstar lifestyles. So from that point of view, they've been unaffected by fame or anything like that. It's nice when they've had their 15 minutes of fame, a particularly good cup run or something like that, but they've gone back to their normal lives, and they're just really very, very nice people to chat to. And it's been really interesting to be able to have the chance to meet them on a one-to-one basis and talk to them and ask them various questions that you might have been thinking about. I wonder what he thought in that particular game. So it's nice from that point of view. But they've all so far been really nice people.
Who's your best ever player?
I was asked this question once before, and there were 4 players who, to me, for various reasons, typify Enfield Football Club, and they all were playing about the time that I started watching the club. There was the captain at the time was a lad called Tony Jennings, who was the England semi-professional captain. He played over 400 games for the club, and he was just one of those players. He gave heart and soul to the club, and he was dependable. And if you speak to any of the players who played alongside him, he was just a wonderful chap as well as a wonderful footballer. A defender, left back called John Tone, who was only about 5'6", but would run himself into the ground for the club. He would put so much effort in. Wasn't the most talented of players, but he gave everything he could for the club. Steve King, again played about 600 games for the club. Loved the club so much that once he stopped playing, he helped out the supporters team. And when you speak to him, his love of the club was as great as any fans. And possibly the most talented player I ever saw was a player called Noel Ashford, who, had he wished, could have played possibly at any level in the football. And again, if you ask most fans who was the best player they ever saw, if they watched Enfield in the 1980s, they'll say Noel Ashford.
Best ever match?
Yes. The problem with the matches I watch with Enfield is all Premiership football now is televised. All 90 minutes can be picked up somewhere. The problem with Enfield's games in the 1980s and 1990s, most of them were never filmed. So it's difficult to remember specific matches, but one that stands out in my mind is The very first year we played in the Alliance Premier League, which was the top flight of non-league football. Right at the start of the season, there were 3 teams at the top of the table, Enfield, Dagenham and Bath, and we had to play Bath 2 weeks in a row. We played down at Bath and beat them 1-0, and then the following week we played them at Southbury Road and we beat them 5-1. They were a top team, we were a top team. We played really well. The quality of the goals was fantastic, and I just loved the chance to watch that game again because it wasn't average, it wasn't a cup final, it wasn't a big match, but it's one that stands out in my memory.
Best ever moment?
I don't know. There are so many good memories and so many bad memories with football. It's as in life. There's good times and bad times. It's a strange kind of memory, but one that I do recall is going back to when I spoke earlier about my mate who was a Liverpool fan. I was a Man United fan. Late 70s, Liverpool were the dominant club in England. It's hard to believe now with Man United being at the top, but Liverpool were dominant, won everything. 1977 FA Cup final, Liverpool played Manchester United, and all week, from the time the 2 clubs qualified for the final, I was getting stick from him about what Liverpool were going to do for Manchester United, and Liverpool were on track for the treble, which had never been done at that stage. And come cup final, I just kept quiet because I thought I've got no way I can fight back at this because what he's saying is correct. Come cup final day, Man United beat Liverpool 2-1, and that Monday morning going to school, I do remember fondly because he didn't have a word to say that morning. So it's a strange kind of memory, but it was one that gave me quite a bit of personal pleasure.
Worst memory?
Yeah. Worst memory by a long way was losing Southbury Road ground. Whether it was because it was a link with my dad, note that my dad used to go and watch the club there in the 60s, and my mum subsequently became a supporter of the club as well and a season ticket holder. So it was a real family place, and outside of my own house, it's probably the place I felt most at home. That losing the ground, it was something somewhere special. I think any supporter finds their club a special place, and it was a big wrench to leave. I wasn't happy with what was happening at the club behind the scenes, and as such, that really brought an end to my supporting of the football club. So it was a big wrench.
Has there been any interviews or any answers or things that surprised you about the process?
No. I mean, I've been pleasantly surprised with the fact that so many of them have been willing to give up their time to come down and participate in it, which has been really nice. I don't think the answers have surprised me. 1 or 2 of them have just give you a bit of an insight into the reasons why certain things happened. And as I say, it's nice to have the player's perspective on something because, from my point of view, all I do is just read reports and read other people's written accounts of things happening. To actually have somebody who was there and was a party to it, it's nice to have their viewpoint on it. But I don't think anything's particularly surprised me.
What prompted you to write the book?
I suppose it was a case, having stopped going to watch Enfield, there was a void in your life because it's a reasonably large commitment that had disappeared. Having the interest in the football, and also whereas you can go and buy countless books on Spurs, Manchester United, Liverpool, the big clubs, non-league clubs, the people who write the books tend to be the real die-hard fans. And also, if you're going to do something like that, you have to be interested in the subject. It's no good doing it if you're not interested because it'll be a half-hearted attempt and it won't come out right. So it filled a void. I had the interest in the club history. It had never been done at that stage, so I started doing the research to do that, to fill the gap. And I wanted to keep the memory of my club alive as long as possible because there will come a time when there won't be anybody around who will have seen football at Southbury Road, won't know how good a club it was. So it's my way of trying to keep the memory of the club alive. Generally speaking, most people have been very positive about it. They like the fact that, I think the players like the idea of the fact that somebody has gone to the effort to do that. They appreciate it because in a way it's immortalising their efforts. The idea behind the book was to make it one of those books that would trigger memories for the fans. They'd go down a list of matches and things like, oh yeah, I remember going to that game. I remember such and such happening, or yeah, that was a game where the coach didn't get there till half time and we missed the first 45 minutes. Or they'll come across a player's name and think, don't remember him. And it's one of those things. It was meant to be something to not only keep them to give an idea to people who didn't witness the club what a good club it was, but also to keep the memories alive of those who did witness it and bring matches, players, events back to them to keep it alive in their memory.
And how's football changed and what do you think it's done to the game?
I personally have very, very little interest in football now, as it is. I'm still fanatical about the history of the club, and even outside of Enfield, I'll still do research on football history because that interests me. Football itself is not the sport that I grew up loving. People used to play for the love of the sport. They now play to an extent for the money and for the rewards it gives them. And I think that devalues the sport itself. Television coverage is so dominant. When I first started to watch football, you'd have highlights on a Saturday night match of the day, Sunday afternoon, the big match, and you get the occasional live match like the cup final. And you used to look forward to it. You might get the occasional midweek game of cup replay. It was an event having football on television. Now it's an everyday occurrence, and it devalues it because you get so much run-of-the-mill football. So few people realise that football even exists outside the Premier League because they've fed a constant diet of it. And I don't feel anything towards football the way that I used to. When you go right back to, say, immediately after World War II, and before that, the players were very much second rate to the teams. They played relatively small wages when teams played in front of massive crowds, so the clubs were gaining all the revenue. When the minimum wage and freedom of contract came in the 1960s, that altered the balance, and now it's gone completely the other way. So there have been good points, there have been changes for the better, but now all the power in football is with the players. They dictate who they play with, where they play. The clubs are very much secondary to them. So it's gone from one extreme to the other. The somewhere in the middle would have been the right place for football to settle, but that's just the way it is.
3 words sum up your love of football.
Entertainment, emotion, enjoyment. A particular favourite book of mine is actually one I'm reading at the moment, and it's about the history of the English amateur football team and the Olympic team. And again, it's about the changing face of football, how initially it was started by a lot of people from Oxford and Cambridge University who believed in playing the game for the glory of the game and not for reward, and how gradually over a period of time their roles in the game were reduced and taken over by people who were interested in the more commercial side of the game. And that's the current book I'm reading, and I'm finding it very, very interesting. GB United. The book was published just before the Olympics because they were talking about reforming a British Olympic team. It was the first time they'd have had one since 1972. So it was really retracing the history from the English Olympics, the Great Britain Olympic team from 1908 onwards.
What's your favourite piece of memorabilia?
I think probably as precious to me as to anything is my dad's collection of Enfield programmes, because it's only through that I'm aware of what matches he would have been to and seen. It's possible that some more might have gone astray at some stage. Mum always threatens she might have chucked some away. I will never know. But at least from them, I do know which matches he went to. So it's nothing particularly valuable, but it's an emotional tie as much as anything. Right. My favourite football trophy is the Halifax Building Society 5-a-side tournament trophy for winners 1987, which is the only football trophy that I have got in my collection. I'm proud to say I was goalkeeper for that very, very auspicious occasion, and for the only time in the branch's history, we won the tournament. So that's my favourite trophy.
You any good at playing football?
I probably find that the older I get, the better I feel. I probably was. I never really played at a decent level. I used to play 5-a-side football in a school gymnasium until injuries overtook me and got the better of me. I loved playing football. I took it far too seriously and probably made it a complete and utter nightmare for everybody who was on my side, because I used to have a go at them the whole time when they didn't put in as much effort as I did. But yeah, I tried to calm down after a while because I got told off.
I know that you trained to be a coach. Why didn't that work out?
I tried to explore various avenues. I did take my refereeing qualifications when I was at grammar school 1 year, rather than play cricket or do swimming, but I couldn't take the abuse from the players, so I never actually took that any further than qualification. And as far as coaches were concerned, yeah, I thought it would be quite nice. It's another avenue that I hadn't explored. I then witnessed a couple of coaches being in charge of a group of 8, 9, 10-year-olds and I realised that probably wasn't for me either. No, I didn't honestly think I'd be able to keep control of that number of kids for that long period of time.
And as soon as you picked up your pen to paper, and as soon as you started writing a book, did you know straight away that was what the right thing for you to do was?
Yeah, it was something. I had compiled a book previously, so I'd got some kind of idea of what it involved. It was a labour of love, but it was something I wanted to do, and yeah, it was something that had to be done.